Former Disney theme park employees, what are some dirty secrets or stories you can tell us about your time there? You have to be in specific height ranges to play the different characters. Because Mickey's height range is so short, he's usually played by a woman. Likewise for Donald, although the most successful and best-known Donald that I knew while I worked there was a little person. When the princess face characters come backstage, they have to take off their dresses so they don't get dirty while they're on break, so the princesses are usually walking around in smock and bloomers if you see them back there. There is some serious cognitive dissonance when you walk back and see Snow White in her bloomers on her phone, cursing up a storm. People also harass the characters super frequently. I was working with Ariel, and cast members will always count down before they take a photo so people have time to get into position. I counted down and this teen boy decided to rip off one of Ariel's shells. I had to open his camera and expose his film so the photo didn't get developed and passed around. I found out later I was supposed to take it to the Kodak shop to have the film developed and that one removed, but I'd always heard the rumors about ruining the film and nobody really trains you on that, so I just went with it. The little jerks deserved it. Yeah, surely that's grounds for being immediately ejected from the park, right? It should be. Although when it comes to protecting their employees, I hear Disney hasn't been the best about that, but I won't get into it because I'm sure we're going to hear about it. Next story. My dad used to work with the guy who played Donald Duck back in the 80s, and I think he used to perform at other events around Orlando. One time he was playing a leprechaun at a car dealership's St. Patrick's Day sale when my family was there looking for a minivan. This would have been about 84 or 85. I was about 6, my sisters were 5 and 1. My 5-year-old sister was a little freaked out by this bearded, adult-voiced man talking to my dad who wasn't much taller than herself. "But Daddy, he's so short," she cried. My dad was mortified. His friend, though, took it in stride. Fast forward about 13 years, my sister started working at Disney in the height range for either of the Chipmunks or sometimes Winnie the Pooh. One of her coworkers was the Donald Duck guy who totally remembered our dad and the day she got freaked out at the car dealership. They became pretty good friends, if I recall. Next story. During the construction of Pandora at Animal Kingdom, a very beloved superintendent passed away on the project of an immediate heart attack. Mid-sentence and while opening the door to the construction trailer, George Burke just died. The project was very affected by this. His knowledge of the work that needed to be done was deep and irreplaceable. His laughter and personality were loved by all 1,400 workers that were there. A couple years after he passed, we were finishing the project and found the perfect way to pay homage to George. They invited his family to the middle of an active construction site to let them view it. George's red hard hat with the black Nordic cross on top was attached to the rockwork in the middle of the flowing river to the left of the entrance to Flight of Passage and plastered over. The family, friends, and a few Imagineers were the only people there. Only we can point out where the hard hat is underneath the plaster, theming, and plants. I revisit the spot every time I go to Pandora. Next story. My sister-in-law got the role of Cinderella at Disneyland Paris. She had to practice Cinderella's autograph over and over because although different actresses play her all over the world, the signature of the character has to be identical anywhere it's signed for consistency. I never even considered this. I guess that makes sense. It'd be weird for a kid to get their signature one place and then see it somewhere else and it's completely different. They are supposed to be the character, so fair enough. However, my handwriting is terrible. Just another reason I couldn't be a Disney princess. You know, among others. Next story. Disney Cruise Line here. I used to go into the complaint system and read all the guest complaints from previous cruises. The amount of complaints that were there because of sheer stupidity on the guests' part was staggering. People seem to think that because they're paying lots of money, they're allowed to do or say whatever they want, which, of course, can be unsafe on a ship. This might break the magic, but a lot of Disney princes are gay. Also, bad in bed. Looking at you, Aladdin/Naveen. We also had a crew member caught assaulting a child and he was promptly thrown in jail. But you better believe the media didn't cover it. Next story. A friend of mine worked at Disney World. According to her, Epcot is the best place to work. When she was at the Magic Kingdom, she said she went home crying all the time because the moms were so mean. Edit. She also said that cast members got to do something I think is called magic moments. At her gift shop, she could just give a park goer something for free. She said that was a perk. Next story. Not a Disney employee, but I saw a sort of behind-the-scenes event at Disneyland that was interesting. There's no smoking in Disneyland, except in like 1 or 2 designated areas that might not even be there anymore, I'm not sure. Anyhow, I was waiting around the side of one of the attractions near the Space Mountain buildings that was next to a bunch of doors by a service entrance type area with virtually no one around. A guy decides to sneak a cig. He leans on the wall next to the doors, looks around and lights up a cigarette. Gent got 2 puffs puffs in before the door next to him opened and a guy in a polo came out. Smoker drops a cigarette, grinds it out with his foot, then follows a Disney polo shirt guy into the building and the door closes. Best part, 30 seconds later, door swings open, a custodian pops out, sweeps the ground up cigarette butt into a dustpan in 1 second, backs into the doorway without ever touching the door as it closed in front of him. Whole thing took less than a minute. I have no clue what happened to the guy. Oh, Pete, let me tell you, you don't want to know what happened to the guy. What the mouse does behind closed doors is none of our concern. Except, for this entire thread. Next story. A true story that is dirty ethically. Before I worked for them, when I was just an annual pass holder, I got overcome by the heat and humidity. Almost had heat stroke. I was at the bathrooms outside the Epcot entrance. 2 security guards wanted to take me to the park's first aid, but a Disney manager refused. He gets in the park when he buys a ticket. Manager walks away for a minute. Security guard says, "Man, I can't believe this," and "What an operation." 30 minutes for Reedy Creek Fire Department to show up. I was so sick I didn't even pull out my AP until they got there. Security guard number 1 says, "Now we can go to first aid." Suddenly, that manager is all about helping me, and so apologetic. He pushed me in a wheelchair all the way to first aid. "Can I get you some water, sir?" Yeah, big freaking phonies. Next story. I worked at Walt Disney World 93 to 97, in Frontierland and Adventureland, foods. Mostly I worked the turkey leg wagon in Frontierland. The few months I was assigned to the Sunshine Tree Terrace refreshment stand, there was a huge fake sunshine tree in the space. It had transparent green plastic leaves and plastic oranges. There were light projectors on the ceiling to make it look like the sun was filtering through the tree. The leaves and sometimes the oranges would fall off. They had been installed in 71, so 23 years later they would just drop. Every time one fell off, I took it home. In 2005, the sunshine tree was removed and destroyed. I have a shoebox full of leaves and 3 oranges, the last surviving pieces of the sunshine tree. Next story. I worked there for 3 months 2 years ago with my girlfriend at the time, and anything newsworthy that happens there, usually negative, immediately gets shot down by the official page of Disney, Twitter, Insta, Facebook. They keep everything hush hush. Lightning struck a bathroom building and there was a small fire, and my girlfriend and I weren't working that day, but we were there enjoying the park for free because we're cast members. She recorded it and posted it on her Twitter. News media pages were commenting and asking her questions like when, how, what's being done, and before she could reply, the Disney page said to disregard the video because it wasn't true. The video was edited, and the media pages stopped asking after that. She gets called into the office the next day and was super close to losing her job. The reason she didn't was because of how much seniority she had, but she was basically on probation after that. Disney is screwed up. They don't tell people anything. Next story. I've never worked there, but once in a professional capacity, I was given a 6 a.m. walking tour of the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. What I was most struck by was the pirate characters up on the bridges or seen in windows or on the attacking ship. None of them have any legs. Their top half only mounted on poles. If the boat riders can't see a part of an animatronic character, doesn't need to exist. Next story. Obligatory, not an employee, but from a school band, interestingly enough. I was there for our school's performance, as we were going to march down Main Street in the evening. Before that, though, we got a short behind-the-scenes look at one part of the park. It wasn't all too interesting, except for maybe a few partially out-of-costume employees. While we were being told our path for our march, however, we were told about the color they used to paint the buildings outside of the park. Apparently, they're painted a specific shade of green, specifically made to be uninteresting, nicknamed Go Away Green. This is just so people who snoop around outside of the main attractions are less likely to go inside buildings they're not supposed to. Pretty neat. Edit. Correction. As the comments have said, Go Away Green is not to stop wandering tourists. It's to help certain buildings blend into the background as to not spoil the magic of the park. Sorry. Next story. Former amusement park employee in SoCal. In the 80s, we had fantasy characters in full bodysuits like Disney, and they would walk around and take pictures and shake hands with the guests. Well, LA gangbangers loved this amusement park, and were always starting trouble. One of our characters in costume was set on fire and had to jump into a park water feature to extinguish the flames. After that incident, they were assigned security chaperones for safety. In some weird backwards way, I feel like being assigned a security chaperone would make me feel less secure. Like, oh, this is like a real threat I have to think about all the time now. Uh-oh. Next story. Not a Disney employee, but hear me out. I was a bartender at a popular bar that, because of some technicalities, was considered to be part of the Disney World property. After midnight, most, if not all, of our regulars were students from the Disney College program. Disney employees are not, under any circumstances, allowed to leave Disney in their costumes. Enter us. Plus, a brilliant loophole for young employees who want to grab a drink after work before retiring to their Disney apartments. Have you ever seen a drunk, headless Winnie the Pooh fall down a flight of stairs? Well, I have. The craziest thing I remember happening was when Lilo decided to toss a drink on an Epcot, Germany employee who knew that she would most likely get fired for having alcohol stains on her lederhosen. I missed that place. Next story. I used to occasionally work at one of the outdoor carts in front of the castle at Disneyland. There's water in various areas of the park, so we get a lot of ducks. And in the springtime, the babies would hatch and walk around with their mothers. People don't always pay attention to where they're going and sometimes step on one of them, usually ending them. If I was able, I would step away from my car to escort a family of ducks to safety. Next story. Third-hand story here. My brother told me that the costumed characters could be sued if they took off their costume heads in any circumstance, including if they fell into the fake lake, because that would destroy the magic of Disneyland. He also said that there is a massive network of tunnels underneath the entire park. Next story. Hello, previous Magic Kingdom cast member here. Once, while I was working, a guest at the Contemporary Resort jumped and took their own lives. Magic Kingdom shut down transport for a little bit to get things cleaned up. This occurred at night, so the only reason it was reported is because guests on the monorail and in one of the Contemporary's restaurants saw somebody jump from the roof. There were also quite a few times that guests would try to jump off of the boat. Luckily, these attempts at their own life were not successful. It was the boat that takes you to Magic Kingdom, and the lagoon would be shut down for the rest of the day after such events. You will never find these stories in the media, and Disney keeps these type of events super hush-hush. Apparently, guests taking their own lives within Disney resort grounds is pretty common. Narrator's commentary. Opie started this so enthusiastically. Full on, hello, previous Magic Kingdom cast member here, exclamation mark. I thought this was going to be a bit cheerier than it was. Nope, immediately into someone jumping off a building. Come on, man. Next story. Worked on the cruise ships for a year. Disney is super screwed up. A crew member died from an unknown illness a few years back, and after a year or so, the body still hasn't been returned to the family, despite their protests. Disney were refusing to return it for a reason I can't remember. It was something along the lines of not wanting an investigation on the body so they wouldn't get in trouble. Next story. Obligatory not me, but I went to college with a woman who played Snow White. She said she wanted to quit on her very first day because she had so many screaming, vomiting, angry, hungry, drooling children handed to her for photos. She said it was the absolute worst. I'm not sure how long she stuck it out for, but I know it was not long. Next story. Not the theme parks, but I worked at the Disney store back when they first started popping up at the malls. They made us sing the M-I-K-E-Y song at the end of every staff meeting, and about half of the staff would cry when they sang it because they just loved Disney so much. They would send you home if you didn't have the Disney spirit, if you were in a visibly bad mood or unhappy. If you got sent home for this more than 3 times, they would fire you. This was back when the female employees wore what was basically a 50s-style cheerleader costume and were constantly harassed. We weren't allowed to be rude or dismissive when being harassed unless someone aggressively groped us. It was a super weird job. Next story. No idea how different it is now, but the underground tunnels always smell like hot garbage. Literal hot garbage, as the tunnels are used to collect and transport everything that gets thrown away. It's real bad in the summer. There used to be a trailer park in Lake Buena Vista for the foreign workers for Epcot. These people were basically indentured servants for Disney, and they worked them like dogs. But oh boy, did they like to party. The crap that went on there is legendary. My understanding is that the trailer park is long gone, and the foreign workers are handled a lot differently now. There used to be an annual event where a large Christian organization rented out the entire park. Every cast member hated these events. These kids went wild. Drugs, alcohol, banging in the Tomorrowland bushes, fights, jumping off rides, especially the Haunted Mansion. Just name it. These kids were doing it. Fireworks get boring when you see them every night. There is, or was, a very weird culture there, cult-like. Seasonal employees were largely segregated from the full-timers. They used to sell cold cuts by the pound on Mondays in the employee cafeteria. I'd load up on that stuff and live on it a week at a time. I continued to use the backstage passages and the tunnels long after I quit. Nobody ever challenged me. As long as you met the grooming standards and looked like you knew where you were going, it was easy. I don't recommend trying this unless you're looking for a lifetime ban, though. There used to be a water park in the artificial lake that was just abandoned. There are a lot of theories, but it was most likely a decision based on the fact that Florida lakes can sometimes have parasites that cause meningitis-like symptoms and often results in death or severe brain damage. The Magic Kingdom Park is actually on the second floor. The land was cleared and the tunnels and offices were constructed, then the park went on top. There's only a small section of the tunnels that actually goes below the actual ground level. There was a pump going constantly to keep it dry. I will say, OP, getting a parasite from the Disney water park would not be fun. Imagine the merch opportunities, though. I went to Disneyland and all I got was this stupid brainworm. Next story. Not a former employee, but I remember hearing about the Disney College program. Basically, college kids work at the theme parks for an hourly wage, like $11 an hour. The interesting thing is the college program offers housing, which costs like $110 to $200 a week, and there's a $400 admin fee when you first start. You have to pay this fee every time you extend your contract. They try to keep the workers on campus and in the Disney properties spending money. The whole thing ends up sounding like a revolving door of cash where the college students work and get paid, but most of the money stays inside of Disney. Disney is pretty upfront with these various fees, and any problem with a bunch of other college kids is probably a blast, but it doesn't seem like the best way to actually make and save money. Next story. In 2016, Yvaineshet Vaini Mesfin, a janitor at Disneyland Resort Anaheim, died alone in her car, which she'd been living in for 7 years. Even though she worked full-time, she wasn't paid enough to be able to afford rent. Her death was part of a larger conversation about how disgustingly low Disney pays its workers. I'm a Ritrian, and I remember reading her story. It just broke my heart. She was 61, an immigrant and a domestic worker, just like my mom and so many of the women who raised me. It is so infuriating that a company as huge and unbelievably wealthy as Disney still chooses to exploit their workers, especially their most vulnerable workers. How can you justify someone working 40 hours a week and they're still unable to afford housing? Freaking evil. I hate to be a massive pessimist, but isn't that a lot of lower level work? I feel like there are a lot of people who have to work more than 40 hours a week to be able to afford rent, and because they're barely scraping by, they can never afford a house. Anyway, that's not what this thread is about. My heart goes out to her, though, and I really hope I didn't butcher her name like I think I did. Next story. Worked at Disneyland for almost 5 years. I personally haven't gone to see the Disney doctor for cast members, but I know friends who have, and I heard the doctor doesn't give a crap about the CMs coming in for injuries. The time I was there, photographers and other departments weren't allowed to drink water from the water fountains because we were, quote, on stage. It was a big issue the last year I worked there, and some of the leads were fighting for umbrellas for photographers. It gets really brutal in Cars Land where it's 5 times hotter, almost passed out from the heat and dehydration. Next story. This was years ago at Disneyland, but there used to be a show of Tinkerbell flying through the sky before fireworks started in the summer. They would put the spotlight on her as she went down a zip line and go black just as she crossed to a backstage area. The novelty of it was that there was no sophisticated mechanism to stop her. There were literally just a couple of guys in a tower at the end of the zip line holding a mattress that she would crash into to stop. Nightly CMs would gather at the base of the tower backstage just to see this happen. As soon as she crashed, everyone would go back to their locations. Oh, I thought this was going to end badly. Did you? I can't be the only one, right? I thought something was going to go wrong. Next story. Former cast member at one of Disney's retail stores, and I don't have any big secrets because my time there was very temporary and short. But one of my managers was a demon. One of the meanest ladies I've ever met, and I'm surprised she even liked Disney. She had no consideration for anyone's time and would change my entire schedule and tell me about it very last minute. One of my shifts ended at 4 a.m. once, and she comes up to tell me she switched stuff around and expected me back in the store by 11 a.m. I ended up quitting. Next story. Never worked for Disney, but the employees used to share underwear. Disney didn't want regular underwear to be visible, so they made their own, and instead of giving everyone their own pair, they were traded around until people started noticing stains and getting pubic lice. Each character has their own pair now, but it's still really weird. Next story. Had to maintain the Disney look. No facial hair with the exception of groomed mustache. Picture Walt Disney. Clean-looking haircut that couldn't hang over the ears or neck. Male. Before I started a shift, I was given a razor and asked to shave because of stubble/5 o'clock shadow. This was 2007 to 2010-ish. Lifeguard at resort pools. Next story. Had a cousin who worked there in early 2000s. She got company housing. Rent for housing was something like double market value, and rent was automatically deducted from pay. She didn't have to live on company property, but rent would be taken from her regardless. She also had a brain tumor and a note from her neurologist saying she could only work a certain number of hours per week. Her manager pretty much ignored that. Next story. Not a theme park story, but Disney store. I went through several rounds of interviews for store manager. Got to the end and they told me I could have the position, but your beard has to go. No beards allowed because, quote, only villains have beards. I listed several non-villain bearded Disney characters: Genie, Sultan, Merlin, Zeus, 6 out of 7 dwarves, but that doesn't change the policy, of course. I just wanted them to know their reasoning was dumb even within the world of Disney. I took it as a sign that I would be miserable at Disney and turned it down. Next story. I had a friend who was a gorgeous redhead in her 20s. She got cast to play Ariel at Disney World. She returned home after a few months, saying they were pressuring her into getting breast implants. To quote her, quoting her manager, "There's no way Ariel has such small boobs." Narrator's commentary. Oh, I'm sorry, manager. I didn't know you were an expert on the subject. Would you like to cite some sources? Any source you might cite, I don't think Disney would like very much. Next story. Former Disneyland employee here. We see everything in the rides. There are cameras everywhere and we have night vision. Yeah, I saw you cop a feel on your girl when you thought no one was watching. We actually care a lot about the guest experience. If someone drops their ice cream, I can get them a new one free of charge. It's called Keeping the Magic. And in the Indiana Jones ride near the giant snakes after the bridge, there's a large metal slab on the ground. Under that slab is an opening that falls into a large empty space. The opening is in the middle of the space and about 10 feet high. There's no rope, no ladder, and no stairs to reach the opening from inside the space. There are no other ways to get out of that space other than the opening in the ceiling, and there are no lights. You could literally fall in there and be trapped forever in darkness if someone doesn't come and help you out. It is for this and many other reasons there is a checkout system on the ride. If you enter the ride on foot, you take a card. When you return from the ride, you turn in the card. If any cards are missing, the ride cannot be turned on and a search party must go out until that person is found. Next story. Alright, let's give this a whirl. This is all related to Walt Disney World, and I worked there about a decade ago, so I'm not sure if it's still accurate. I never participated in many shenanigans other than calling in sick and then sneaking into the parks, but I had a lot of friends and heard a lot of stories. There's a pretty secluded and often unused place backstage at Space Mountain where cast members could sneak off to hook up. It's not very convenient nor very clean, but that never really stopped people. All in all, young cast members were very frisky, especially with the constant flow of college-aged temporary hires at the time. The general rule of thumb when I worked there was that male cast members were gay until proven straight, because there was quite a large population of gay males down there. Great if you're gay, but it also meant that if you were a straight dude, as long as you weren't totally creepy, your odds of finding a pretty attractive girl were quite high, because many there were looking for their Prince Charming. Drinking culture was huge with the college program kids at the time I was there. There seems to have been a whole mini industry built around taking the CPs on party buses to foam parties and drinking cruises. Although partying was big with the CPs, it seemed to be massive with the international hires who worked at Epcot, like competitive binge drinking between the countries. I was in a sorority in college, and frat dudes had nothing on these people. This one is dark, but there was a co-cast member of mine who was charged with soliciting a minor a few years after I left. I made the mistake of reading how the sting went down, and what he was doing was chilling. I always felt strange around him, but this was worse than what I would have imagined. Definitely awful to think about him working in such a kid-centric environment. Something that also isn't very fun, but everyone should be aware of, is just how exploited the cast members are down there. So many people get into the work down there because they want to make magic for people, and have hopes of moving up the ranks. But they most always get stuck in poorly paid, dead-end jobs. Fortunately, many people I worked with have moved on and out of the area. One or two have stuck around and moved up substantially in the company. Then there are those who are still just there, sometimes still loving their job, sometimes hating it, and sometimes just too caught up in their own Peter Pan syndrome. One last soapbox moment. Be kind to the cast members. The rules they're enforcing aren't their own. Quite frankly, most of them would be glad to bend rules or do favors for those who are genuinely kind and don't feel entitled. Although they won't bend rules that are set for safety reasons, whether or not they can bend rules often comes down to a few things. If they have the power in the first place, who is managing or supervising that day, whether or not they just did a favor for someone else, luck of timing, and your attitude. Don't beg, don't hit on them, just be polite. Oh, and never touch a cast member without their consent. On a lighter note, about a decade ago there was an alligator who would show up in the moat backstage at Space Mountain where cast members take their breaks. No idea if it's still there, but it was like a little game for cast members to go out and see Fluffy. Okay, so I'm hearing not making a lot of money and then also a lot of drinking. I'm not understanding how these two things are mathing out. Also, OP, don't be bad for something that's not very fun. This thread is talking about dirty secrets. That's the stuff we want. Next story. Not a former employee, but we are a Disney family and have been there many times. Our first trip to Magic Kingdom, we went on the People Mover in Tomorrowland and the interior lights to Space Mountain were on, but the ride was still operational, so we saw everything. Then we went on the Space Mountain coaster again. All the lights are on. So it was a ride. Didn't know it was supposed to be in the dark. It was just an okay roller coaster. I preferred Big Thunder much better. Next trip we go on Space Mountain and it's working properly. All dark. Changed our minds on it just being an okay ride. Next story. When people say that it's like being a part of a cult, it's 100% true. In any job you have, there's bias. But at Disney, if you mess with the wrong leader, manager, you'll basically be blacklisted from ever working your way up in the company. The amount of abuse I've endured from guests and other cast is asinine, especially regarding COVID. I worked in my department for 3 years, was denied multiple promotions for really never any reason. I worked 50+ hour work weeks religiously, covered extra shifts, you name it. But because I made a mistake in my first year, I never got anywhere. If you don't kiss the butt of every manager, eat lunch with them, cater to their every whim, you stay at the bottom. I got so fed up after my interview for trainer. I was supposed to interview in the AM, showed up, got yelled at for showing up, and he told my coordinator to apologize to me, then rushed me around my area in 15 minutes because he, quote, had a meeting, then brought up feedback he'd kept from me for months just for the interview and to deny me trainer. I quit 3 days later. Next story. It's no longer there, but I worked at Pleasure Island in the early 2000s and the tech crew break room was hidden behind one of the nightclubs out of view of the guests. The amount of guests who would sneak off behind the clubs to screw was too damn high. We would sit on our little covered patio and smoke while enjoying our impromptu amateur voyeur content. Occasionally we would have to shoo them away, but I generally just let them finish as to not be a C block. Next story. Not a WDW cast member, but I'm married to someone who was. The guest inaccessible parts of the Haunted Mansion are gross. Think asbestos, dust, grease, cobwebs, and all kind of other crap that has accumulated over literally decades. Every time wifey had to work there, she came home and bolted for the shower. Next story. Disney are very strict on their company policies. I don't care how much you want to have a Bible verse stamped into a leather bracelet with Mickey Mouse's face on it, I won't do it. And no, waving a dollar bill in my face screaming, "In God we trust," isn't going to change the fact that Disney refuses to associate itself with its merchandising with any religious, political, or alternate branding statements without it coming directly from Disney-endorsed and designed merch. Anyway, now that I've got that out of the way, a few other fun facts. The Hollywood Tower of Terror is so cramped in terms of its space that the break room is actually tucked away in a tiny part of the tower, and the dodgy elevator ride to get up to that is freakier than the ride itself. Every single item of clothing is barcoded like a library book that you check out from costuming, except some items you have to sign out manually. This includes small brooches or badges, including the heavy metal SHIELD badge for the Marvel superhero store. I assume people have stolen/sold them on eBay before, since if you lose it, they deduct $50 from your paycheck. Working at a confectionery location in merchandise, sometimes if there's a lot of food being thrown out because of its use-by date, a nice manager, leader, might give those on late-night closing shifts product knowledge. I once took home 10 giant Mickey cookies that are like $7 each, along with several cake pops and brownies for free. I was very popular that day on the bus ride back to DCP housing. The only costumes in the Magic Kingdom that can go anywhere for the sake of not breaking theming are leaders in plain clothes, coordinators, or those in the generic stock costume. So on stock shifts, you become constantly called up for dealing with errands like transporting lost massive wallets filled with cash, or phones to guest services, or running around in the tunnels with trays of caramel apples to transport them from one confectionery location to another. What the light doesn't touch, you don't see. Spaceship Earth has whole piles of junk hidden in the center. There's also a random barbecue just sat underneath the launch of the rock and roller coaster. Guests don't do their research. I was once walking to my shift in Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood Studios, not clocked in yet, so technically should have just ignored the guest because it was such a dumb question. They asked me where the Twister ride was. You know, the one that used to be in Universal Studios and was demolished for the Jimmy Fallon 4D movie. And yeah, we constantly get asked where Harry Potter is or where the castle is when it's not in Magic Kingdom. Or also, what time does the 3 p.m. parade start? Vacation brain is definitely real. Next story. I don't work for the resort currently, but I'm not blowing my chances at going back, so throw away. So I worked in table service at Disneyland, the sit-down restaurants. Turns out restaurants are nasty, even at Disneyland. There was a story from Cafe Orleans that happened at some point in the last 5 to 10 years that was a very popular tale around the department. I heard it from someone who worked at that restaurant at the time, so I believe all these details are true. Like I said, restaurants are gross. New Orleans Square restaurants especially so. So, once upon a time, a lady is eating her salad, only to find a little baby mouse in it. Obviously, chaos ensues. Managers and executives come down to deal with it and try to keep the family quiet. I think they essentially had their entire trip paid for to try and avoid breaking news. After this happened, they set rat traps around the restaurant because they didn't know if it came from the lettuce supplier or the restaurant itself. A couple weeks goes by. A guest finds a bug in their salad. Similar chaos ensues, but after that chaos, someone in the kitchen sees a bug fall from the ceiling. So they know that came from the restaurant. Someone is sent into the ceiling to look at it and discovers a rat trap that was forgotten. I'll let you guys imagine what was in the trap. While the cast member was in there, they apparently touched a live wire and were electrocuted in the ceiling. They had to evacuate the kitchen and restaurant so paramedics could help him out. Bugs and things getting in food isn't uncommon for the parks, but this story is so popular because it's so damn out there, and most people know someone who was there for it. Well, it's good they found the trap, at least. That's a positive takeaway. But, just going back a bit, what do you mean there was a mouse? How do you serve food with a mouse in it? How does that ever happen? Surely at some point during plating, you would notice, a rodent. Admittedly, have I worked in a kitchen? No, I don't know how this stuff works. But that seems like it should be able to be caught before it goes out, right? Next story. I was in entertainment in the 70s, and in the inaugural Main Street Electrical Parade. I was the lead canopy carrier in the Snow White unit. The unit right in front of us was a mounted, horseback unit, so we had a trio of janitors right in front of us as we had 20 or so dancers under the canopy, and dancing through horse pies kinda ruined the ambiance. The sweepers had quite a routine of their own to capture any deposits in a variety of choreographed maneuvers that always elicited lots of applause and laughter from the guests. Working for Disney remains one of my favorite parts of my employment history, and one I remember with great fondness. Next story. When I was 12, my grandparents took me to Disney World. We stayed at the brand new Contemporary with all access cards. This hotel was 5 stars. Lobster dinner, steak dinner, amazingness. It also had a monorail go straight through it, which was awesome as a kid. My all-access card got us high-end meals, nice tables, the works. The rooms were amazing. This is how I remember it, anyway. 30 years later, I took my 12-year-old son to the same hotel. I foolishly didn't do any research, other than seeing the price was $700 a night, so I assumed it would be exactly the same. I show up in the places along the same lines as Motel 8 or a Days Inn. There were no real restaurants, fast food only. The rooms were absolutely disgusting. I didn't feel safe. There was no Disney magic. I don't know if any of the other Disney hotels are grand, magical, and amazing like I remember, but this was not. I feel dirty having gone to Disney World as an adult. Next story. This is not a secret, more just an observation of the culture. It really kind of makes me sick and disappointed with humanity. As a cast member at Disney World in '79, I learned quickly that putting people in uniforms brings out the worst in the instinct to other people. Certain cast members in specific uniforms were very high in status, and other cast members were very low. Since you wore your uniforms all the time, your status was immediately spotted, and people tended to treat you better or worse based on your status. Here's the pecking order that I observed. Many cast members told me of this pecking order. This goes low to high. The sweet streepers who emptied the trash cans. The folks in the yellow jumpsuits who sold the popcorn. The folks in turn-of-the-century garb who worked in the stores of Main Street. The retail workers in the other lands with costumes that matched the themes. The ride operators whose costumes were themed to match the land, such as Tomorrowland, Frontierland, etc. The ride operators of Space Mountain, who were near the top of all the ride operators. The monorail operators. They were the absolute pinnacle of ride operators who didn't have some kind of performing role. The ride operators of the Jungle Cruise. They were close to the status of the people in the entertainment division because they had lines and had to be really entertaining. Anyone in the entertainment division, like kids of the kingdom, the performers, singers, and musicians. And oh no, they weren't just a little above everyone below, they were stratospherically above. The tour guides, all females in the English riding horse outfits with the jodhpurs, complete with a riding crop and a fetching little cap on their heads. These girls were basically the top employees who wore uniforms. They met all the VIPs, including Hollywood stars, politicians, billionaires, etc. They could get to the front of any line. They were unstoppable, and they certainly acted like they knew it. Now, everyone I tell this to always asks, weren't the characters the most important people and have the highest status? Sadly, and this is really where it gets sick, they were kind of treated like freaks. All the Goofies had to be really tall, thin men. All the Mickeys and Minnies had to either be short women or little people. They worked very odd shifts, a half hour on, a half hour off, and they always had people around them to help, which also made them seem weird. So all in all, my summer at Walt Disney World demonstrated to me the power of clothing in establishing a hierarchy of status. It's a sad commentary on humanity, but a fact nonetheless. I find it interesting this is the only one that mentions this. Have any of you guys worked at Walt Disney World or something like that? Is there really a status? Okay, at any job there's a sort of social hierarchy, but OP made it sound really dramatic. Is this true? And also, I'm confused what OP means about the cast members being treated like freaks. Like, where does that put them in the hierarchy? Because he didn't put them there. And if he did, then they were the second highest in the entertainment division, if that's what that means. I don't know. Anyway, Disney doesn't sound like the best place to work for. But hey, if you love it, you love it. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. That's the last one, so I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.